I am Julian Vance. I am writing, or rather recording these words, because I cannot reach my phone. I am currently lying on the floor of my apartment on the 24th floor in downtown Chicago. I moved into this new place recently. The apartment is modern and the walls are perfectly soundproofed. I work from home as a data analyst. I bought a massive Maine Coon cat and named him Buster. Buster weighed nearly 26 pounds of pure muscle and thick gray fur. His yellow eyes always watched me with a steady, calm gaze. On Tuesday afternoon, I was trying to hang a heavy frame in the narrow hallway. The wooden ladder slipped under my feet suddenly and without warning. I fell with terrible force onto the cold, hard marble floor. I heard the distinct sound of a snap in my femur and right hip. I screamed in sharp, sudden agony. But my cries were lost in the soundproof walls. I tried to push myself up with my hands. But my body completely refused to respond to my mind's commands. My cell phone was sitting on the high, distant kitchen table. The distance between me and the phone felt like miles of torment and pain. I crawled a few centimeters. But the pain caused me to lose consciousness for long stretches of time. When I opened my eyes, I found Buster standing directly in front of me in absolute silence. He wasn't meowing for food or worried about my condition. He was looking at my broken leg with an intense, deeply uncomfortable focus. He began to sniff the smell of internal blood pooling under the swollen skin. He made a faint sound from deep in his throat. It sounded like a low, terrifying growl. I felt a cold shiver run through my body despite the moderate temperature of the apartment. I tried to push him away with my good hand and pet his head gently. But he didn't budge from his spot. He kept staring into my eyes with a frozen expression. He began to lick a small wound on my ankle caused by hitting the ladder. His rough tongue felt like coarse sandpaper on my thin skin. He licked with such force and strangeness that the skin actually began to bleed before my eyes. I scolded him with a weak, faint voice. He only stepped back 2 paces. He sat there watching me with eyes that never blinked in the gloom. I realized then that I wasn't in my home with a cute pet. I was in a closed cage with a small predator waiting for my moment of weakness. The sun began to set behind the skyscrapers. The shadows grew long in my apartment. Buster began to sharpen his long claws on the carpet near my head. He looked at me as if I were a large piece of meat that had fallen into his jungle. Mystery began to creep into my heart regarding the nature of this silent creature. Did he ever love me? Or was he just waiting for this fall? The silence in the apartment became heavy and haunting like lead in the ear. There was no sound left except my racing breath and the cat's steady growl. The marble floor began to pull the heat from my body and turn it into a harsh chill. Buster now began to circle around me in steady, quiet laps like a shark. Every movement I made was met with a sharp, watchful gaze from him. I began to feel true fear penetrate to the marrow of my bones because of my cat. This apartment that was my sanctuary has now become my solitary, dark prison cell. The first night passed like an eternity of hell and continuous bleeding. I was suffering from a killing thirst and a hunger that began to gnaw at my empty intestines. At dawn, I woke up to a heavy, pressing weight on my tired chest. Buster was sitting with his full weight on my lungs, preventing me from breathing. His claws were embedded lightly in my shirt, touching my skin directly with a chill. When I opened my eyes, I saw his face very close to my pale face. His breath carried the smell of dry blood and fibers from the shredded carpet. He began to meow loudly and sharply. He was demanding his usual daily food. I tried to push him off my chest. But the pain in my hip made me convulse. Buster took advantage of my weakness and began to scratch the arm I used to protect my face. The scratches were deep and organized. It was as if he was testing my current level of resistance. I finally reached the edge of the kitchen after hours of bitter crawling. I tried to pull the tablecloth to drop the cell phone to the floor. But Buster jumped onto the table with lightning speed and the precision of a skilled hunter. He began to push the phone with his claws toward the other edge, far out of my reach. He looked at me while doing this with a terrifying coldness and sharp intelligence. The phone fell into the kitchen sink filled with water, soap, and dirt. I heard the sound of the electrical circuit cutting out. Then the screen went dark forever. My only and last chance to call for help from the outside was gone. I cried from oppression and helplessness. The cat began to meow in a very strange tone. He began to change his strategy now. He began to prevent me from reaching the water. Every time I tried to crawl, he would jump on my back and sink his claws in with force. I became a prisoner of the floor of my luxurious and lonely apartment in this tower. I began to feel a fever creeping into my mind due to the infection of the exposed wounds. Buster no longer moved more than a meter away from me at any time. He began to eat parts of the decorative plants in the house to satisfy his hunger. Then he began to look at me with hungry eyes, more daring than before. I suddenly remembered that I hadn't closed the balcony door before the cursed fall. But the balcony was very far away. The biting cold began to enter the living room. Buster turned from a pet into a sadistic and professional prison guard. He enjoyed watching me suffer and try to survive without any meaningful success. Mystery about his past began to occupy my mind in moments of feverish delirium. I had adopted him from an animal shelter after the death of his elderly owner. They told me then that his owner died alone in his locked apartment. They didn't mention to me how he died, or what the cat did to his body then. Now I realize the secret the shelter hid from me all these years. Buster is not a cat. He is a harvester of souls waiting in silence and stillness. I don't know what time it is now, and I don't care at all. Time has completely lost its meaning in this wide, dark hall. The red light on the recording device has become very faint and extremely weak. It is like a weak heartbeat struggling to survive in this haunting void. I have been lying here for a very long time and I cannot feel my body. I no longer feel my broken leg or the pain of my completely shattered hip. Numbness crawled from my toes to reach the center of my pulsing chest. Buster is still here beside me, watching every exhale that leaves me. He is now sitting directly on my stomach, pinning me down well. His weight feels like a giant boulder of silence and killing loneliness. His warm breath comes out in a terrifying and provocative rhythm beside my right ear. He doesn't move much now. He is waiting for my last reserves to run out. His yellow eyes glow in the darkness of the apartment like two embers of fire. He looks at my eyelids as they close very slowly with extreme fatigue. I have begun to lose the ability to distinguish between my bitter nightmares and reality. I see the concrete jungles of Chicago turning into a real, dense forest. I see Buster growing, becoming a giant shadow that covers all the walls. There is no longer any sound in this luxurious, locked apartment. The soundproof walls have become my true, isolated shroud. I tried to lift my right hand one last time to record these words. But it fell beside me like a dry piece of wood, motionless. Buster began to lick the palm of my hand with excessive force and very clear roughness. His coarse tongue removes layers of skin with total coldness and a silence that shatters the nerves. He is in no hurry to prey on me at all, rather, he enjoys every moment. He enjoys every second of my complete helplessness and my slow end. The cell phone is still submerged in the dark, distant kitchen sink. I see the glint of water there under the pale moonlight from the window. No one will call me today, tomorrow, or at any time. I am completely alone facing this small and very savage creature. I have begun to forget my name and the details of my past life and the faces of absent friends. My childhood memories in Pennsylvania have become just faint, shredded images. I see the faces of my parents fading into an endless gray fog. Buster has now begun to sink the claws of his front paws into my soft neck. He tests the pulse in my carotid artery with regularity and supreme skill. He knows exactly where the life lies in my currently crumbling body. He began to gnaw at my earlobe with a calmness and steadiness that makes me nauseous. I no longer have a voice to scream, cry, or ask for mercy. My tears dried up since the first night of this long and loathsome siege. The air in the apartment has become heavy, smelling repulsive and filled with approaching death. The smell of death has begun to precede its actual occurrence in the corners of this room. Buster suddenly stops and looks toward the large window overlooking the street. He watches the lights of the distant city that never sleeps and never hears my cries. He watches the planes crossing the sky toward the unknown, toward freedom, and the far away. Then he looks back at me with a hidden and very terrifying smile. He is the sole king of this place now, with no partner in it. I am just the remains of memories in his private home that he has seized. The battery in the recorder is almost completely dead, announcing total silence. The sound will disappear and darkness will become the master of the situation in this hall. Buster has begun to change his position to be over my face, blocking my vision. His claws touch my eyelids with a gentleness that suggests an inescapable coming horror. He wants to make sure I see nothing at the end. The mystery surrounding his fate after my departure is what kills me psychologically now. Will he stay here to eat what remains of me for long days and weeks?